You're half asleep in the front seat of a pickup at 4:47 in the morning, wrapped in a canvas jacket that still smells like your father's aftershave, dust, and diesel. Outside, West Texas is just a black outline with stars pinned over it. Then the rig lights appear ahead of you, blazing in the dark like someone dropped a steel cathedral in the middle of nowhere. Men are moving under the derrick, boots thudding, radios crackling, coffee steaming in the cold. Your father jumps down from the platform with drilling mud on his sleeves and the kind of grin that means something big is about to happen. Then the well comes alive. Not politely, not gradually. The earth basically kicks the door open. A roar tears through the morning. Oil shoots upward in a black, shimmering column, higher than the derrick lights, higher than your imagination. And suddenly, everybody is yelling at once. Hard hats go flying. Grown men who normally communicate in grunts and hand signals are hugging like they just won the lottery and invented fire in the same afternoon. Your father laughs, points at the gusher, then looks back at you with that expression every kid waits for. See that? That's what we do. Most children get introduced to the family business through a photo album. You get introduced to yours through a fountain of money hitting the sunrise. Now back up 12 years. You arrive in the world already behind schedule because babies in your family don't enter quietly. They make an entrance. Your first lullaby isn't birdsong or suburban silence. It's the low rumble of engines outside, the murmur of men on the porch, and the screen door banging every time someone comes by to ask your father where the next job's going to be. Your mother can pack a kitchen in 40 minutes, calm a crying kid with one arm, and calculate a household budget through a boom, a bust, and a surprise move before lunch. Your father works in boots so scuffed they look like they've been in fistfights. Between them, they build a home that can survive on any patch of dirt, with running water and a decent coffee pot. You learn fast that in an oil driller's family, home is less of an address and more of a moving target with a toolbox. Other kids grow up measuring distance in blocks. You measure it in lease roads, county lines, and how long it takes your dad to say, "Throw your stuff in the truck, we got work 3 towns over." At 5, you can identify a rig silhouette before you can spell silhouette. At 6, you know the difference between a man coming home tired and a man coming home satisfied. The satisfied walk has swagger in it, shoulders loose, coffee tastes better, jokes land harder. That's the walk your father has after a clean run, a good crew, and a day where steel, mud, pressure, and stubbornness all agreed to work together. At 7, while other kids are collecting baseball cards, you're collecting place names. Midland, Odessa, Kilgore, Bakersfield, Homa. Maybe not all at once, but enough that the map starts looking less like geography and more like family history. Every town has a diner where your father knows somebody. Every town has a gas station where someone leans out from under a truck and yells his name. Every town has a story involving a stuck pipe, a busted pump, a storm, a miracle, or all 4 in the same shift. Your education is not exactly standard. Yes, you go to school, but the real curriculum starts at the dinner table. Lesson 1. When grown men say a job is impossible, they usually mean it's going to be expensive and annoying. Lesson 2. Confidence matters, but competence pays the bills. Lesson 3. If a driller says, "We'll be done by noon," you should maybe not schedule supper around that. Your father doesn't talk like a motivational speaker. He talks like a man who has watched equipment fail, weather turn, investors panic, and crews improvise genius at 2 in the morning. Which means every sentence sounds like it came with dirt under its fingernails. He teaches you how to shake hands properly, how to look people in the eye, how to listen when quiet men finally decide to say something, how to tell the difference between someone who knows the job and someone who just bought a bigger hat. Your mother teaches you the other half of the empire, how to make a fresh place feel like yours by the end of the day, how to keep dignity when the town is temporary. How to host 6 hungry men in a kitchen built for 3. How to stretch a good week without forgetting a bad one might be next. If your father runs steel and pressure, your mother runs civilization. And that's one of the secret joys of being born into this kind of family. You grow up around scale. Not just physical scale, though there's plenty of that. Derricks taller than church steeples. Trucks big enough to make regular traffic look decorative. Equipment so massive it seems less manufactured than summoned. No, the real scale is mental. Everyone around you is always talking about depth, acreage, output, formations, margins, miles, months, risk, luck. Even the ordinary conversations are oversized. Nobody says, work was fine. They say, we were fighting that well for 18 hours and then she finally gave it up. Nobody says, the market changed. They say, prices moved and half the county lost its mind. You don't grow up thinking small. You grow up thinking in horizons. There's also the style. Let's not pretend there isn't style. Oil driller families know how to do practical glamour better than most rich people know how to do luxury. Freshly washed trucks shining like they're campaigning for office. Starched shirts. Boots that cost real money because cheap ones surrender. Company barbecues where the smoke starts before noon and the desserts arrive in aluminum trays the size of satellite dishes. Christmas parties with enough brisket, laughter, and raffle prizes to make a kid think adulthood is just a long parade of work boots and abundance. Some families handed down china. Yours hands down stories big enough to need their own zip code. By 9, you know that the men on your father's crew are not just coworkers. They're uncles without paperwork. One teaches you how to throw a rope. Another lets you sit in the cab and touch switches you absolutely were not supposed to touch. Another claims he once worked 60 hours straight and still had enough energy to win a fist fight and a poker game. This may or may not be true. Accuracy is not always the strongest value in oilfield storytelling. Magnitude is. And the stories are incredible. Wells that came in so hard the whole town heard it. Storms that tried to flatten the site and failed. Tool pushers who could smell a mistake before the gauges caught it. A driller who set his coffee down, glanced at the rig and said, "Something's off." 30 seconds before a chain snapped. These men don't describe work. They narrate battles. Heroic, ridiculous, profitable battles. So, of course, as a kid, you assume this is what all fathers do. You assume everyone's dad returns home sunburned, caked in grit, smelling like effort and possibility. You assume everyone's mother can cook for a surprise crowd and still have lipstick on. You assume every family keeps emergency cash in weird places and treats maps like sacred documents. Then you visit a friend whose father works in an office. He comes home clean. You don't know what to do with this information. Where's the mud? Where's the noise? Where's the dramatic story about a valve, a deadline, and near financial ruin followed by triumph? He says his day was productive. That sounds fake. At 11, you start understanding that your family's life isn't normal. It's better. Not easier, not calmer, definitely not cleaner. Better. Because there's motion in it. There's appetite in it. There's this constant feeling that the world is still unfinished and the adults around you are helping build it. When prices are high, the whole region walks taller. New signs go up. Restaurants fill. Hardware stores get cleaned out. Men who were gloomy in February are buying better pickup tires by June. Your father comes home with a bonus, and your mother pretends to be sensible for about 7 minutes before suggesting a weekend trip, a new washing machine, and a steak dinner in the same breath. Booms make optimists out of everybody. The waitress smiles wider. The banker returns calls faster. Half the town suddenly has renovation plans, and the other half has boat opinions. And if you're a kid in that atmosphere, it's electric. You grow up thinking good things are allowed to happen at full volume. You also learn that money in the oil patch isn't abstract. It has shape. It looks like new tires, better schools, repaired roofs, paid off debt, college funds, orthodontics, and the occasional wildly unnecessary but deeply satisfying purchase. A chrome-heavy truck, a horse trailer, a gigantic grill that could feed a football team and possibly a cavalry unit. Oilfield money never whispers. It pulls into the driveway and honks. By 13, you stop just observing the life and start wanting in. You want the inside jokes. You want the nod from the men. You want to understand the maps laid out on the kitchen table at night while somebody taps a finger on a formation and says, "If that holds, we've got something." So you begin to learn the language, not the polished language of boardrooms, the useful language. Mud weight, casing, kick, lease, bit, crew, shift, blowout preventer, day rate, lost circulation. Words that sound blunt because they are blunt. Words built for action. Every new term makes you feel like you're being admitted into a secret order of people who know how the modern world actually gets powered. And there's a thrill in that. Because while other kids are being told to dream big in motivational posters, you're watching adults do it with machinery, contracts, and weather reports. At 15, you get your first real taste of the work. Not because anyone's trying to romanticize child labor. Relax, you're not running the rig. But you are carrying things, fetching tools, cleaning up, staying out of the way until suddenly one of the men says, "Kid, come here," and hands you a job tiny enough to be safe and important enough to matter. You do it right. Nobody claps. This is not preschool. But someone grunts, "Good," and that single syllable hits harder than a trophy. You spend that summer learning the oilfield version of adulthood. Show up early, don't complain when it's hot. If you don't know, ask. If you say you'll do something, do it. And never stand where steel is having an argument. You come home exhausted and absurdly proud. Your shoulders hurt, your hands ache, your shirt is ruined. You have never felt cooler in your life. Because that's another reason it rocked to be born into an oil driller's family. Competence is sexy there. Not in an internet quote way, in a real, practical, almost spiritual way. The heroes of your childhood are not people who talk well about hard things. They're people who stay useful inside them. The man who fixes the pump at midnight. The woman who keeps the book straight when everyone else is panicking. The crew that keeps going when the weather turns ugly. The family that gets moved to a new town and has curtains up, dinner ready, and kids enrolled by Tuesday. You grow up surrounded by proof that being capable changes the atmosphere around you. That gets in your bones. Even the fun is better. You don't vacation like ordinary families. You migrate gloriously. Motel pools, roadside diners with pie behind glass. Long highways at sunset while your father drives with one wrist over the wheel and your mother unfolds sandwiches from wax paper like a magician producing comfort. You pass pump jacks nodding in the distance like giant metal birds agreeing with themselves. You fall asleep to tires humming on the road and wake up in a new town where the grocery store feels temporary, but the future does not. And the sunsets. Good grief, the sunsets. Nobody sells the sunsets hard enough in these stories. When you grow up around rigs, you get them framed in steel. Orange fire behind the derrick, purple evening settling over tanks and trucks, floodlights blinking on as daylight slips out the back door. Even the sky seems to understand it's supposed to put on a show for people doing serious work. Of course, not every season is a boom. This is still the oil patch, not a children's cartoon. Sometimes the price drops. Sometimes jobs vanish. Sometimes grown-ups get quiet around bills. But here's the strange, beautiful thing about being raised in a driller's family. Even the hard seasons make you stronger in ways soft lives never could. When things tighten, people don't turn delicate, they turn creative. Somebody picks up extra shifts. Somebody knows somebody in another basin. Meals get simpler. Jokes get sharper. Pride stays intact. You watch your parents refuse to panic in front of the kids. And even when you're old enough to realize how much that took, it only makes them seem larger. You learn that stability is not the same as stillness. Your family isn't strong because nothing ever changes. Your family is strong because change keeps showing up and never wins. By 18, the whole life starts making sense. The moves, the noise, the optimism, the obsession with preparedness. The reason everyone in your orbit treated trucks like life support systems and coffee like diplomacy. You realize you were never just raised around a job. You were raised around a worldview. One that says the ground hides value, risk can be calculated, problems are for solving, and tomorrow might be huge if you're willing to get up before dawn and go meet it. That is an unbelievably powerful way to enter adulthood. Some people inherit caution. You inherit momentum. Some people are taught to wait for permission. You are taught to bring tools. And maybe that's the best part of all. Being born into an oil driller's family gives you front row access to ambition without pretension. The people around you are not performing success. They're wrestling with it, building it, chasing it through heat, debt, storms, and stubborn rock. When they celebrate, it's earned. When they lose, they regroup. When they win big, they don't act surprised for long. They clean up, laugh hard, and start thinking about the next well. Years later, someone from outside the patch will ask what it was like. They'll expect hardship, maybe a gritty story, maybe some rough-edged nostalgia with a country song playing behind it. And sure, there was grit, plenty. But that's not what you remember first. You remember the scale, the energy, the confidence, the way adults around you treated the future like something you could go out and reach with both hands. You remember floodlights before sunrise, boots by the back door, your mother turning a temporary rental into a kingdom by supper, your father coming home with that tired, victorious walk. You remember company picnics, long roads, loud laughter, and the deep childhood security of knowing that the people raising you could fix almost anything that broke, including a bad mood. You remember standing under a vast open sky while machinery thundered and men shouted, and money, risk, and hope all mixed together in one giant, beautiful mess. And you remember how it made the world feel. Not safe in the small sense, safe in the big sense. Safe because it was full of builders. Safe because the grown-ups knew how to handle pressure. Safe because even when life got messy, your people had a habit of turning chaos into breakfast, logistics, and another shot at prosperity. That kind of childhood does something to you. It makes you less afraid of uncertainty. It makes you respect work without worshiping misery. It makes ordinary life feel a little too quiet, a little too padded, a little too small. Because once you've seen a well come in at dawn and watched tough men laugh like little boys under a rain of black gold, the world never really goes back to normal size. And that's why it rocked to be born into an oil driller's family. Not because it was perfect, because it was alive. Because your childhood came with engines, horizons, risk, humor, skill, and people who believed the earth still had secrets worth chasing. Because before you were old enough to understand economics or geology or the price of crude, You already understood something better. Life was not meant to be watched from the porch. It was meant to be driven toward in the dark, with coffee in a thermos, dust on the windshield, and the feeling that by sunrise, everything could get bigger.